on the issue about liberalism, and I think you're absolutely right. And so there is a difference between being a liberal and a libertarian. A libertarian says, do what you like. A liberal says, do what you like until it hurts somebody else. And there's a competing set of freedoms there. And obviously there is, for the greater good, there is a case to be made for, submitting some, cashing in some liberties temporarily. And the reason why I voted against the extension of the powers last week, and all of my party did as well, is because we are liberal. Because I think that the government was asking for powers it didn't need for longer than it would have needed them for anyway, and that the guidance was sufficient. And I think that what we've got is a government that does an awful lot of talking about liberty. That's kind of core to its narrative. But the minute that the rubber hits the road, they're not liberals or libertarians. They're authoritarian in their instinct. And if it was only this as a one-off, you could perhaps excuse it maybe. But it came in the same week as we had the crime and sentencing bill, where people get locked up for up to 10 years for just disagreeing with the government. And any old fascist can defend the right to people they agree with. It takes a liberal to defend the right to people you don't agree with. And then at the same time, this nonsense about publicans. I've just written to the PM with one of our landlords here in Kendal to say that you wouldn't be allowed even in the outdoors of a pub if you've not been vaccinated. Given the age profile of the people who frequent pubs and work in pubs, they're not going to be vaccinated, a lot of them, in the 2 weeks' time before it opens. And then you've got this business about carers being told that by law they have to be vaccinated. Well, they are getting vaccinated by choice because they're good people who want to do their jobs well and take care of people.
Passports, that's a really hot topic, isn't it? But what do you feel about the immunity passports?
Yeah, I understand there may be some inevitability when it comes to international travel. I don't like it, but domestically, I think it stinks. I think that, yes, everyone should get vaccinated. It happened to me. It felt like I got a cricket ball hit on my arm for a day or so. It's fine. And it's absolutely the right thing to do. Everybody should go and get vaccinated. But to make them do it, to lock them out of society at this stage just feels, again, very un-British. Yeah.
So why does it feel un-British to coerce people to get vaccinated?
Because I think this is where we get down to whether this is about cultural individual change in the long run or whether it's about, government policy. And surely we want written into our DNA as a species and certainly as a nation, as a people, care for your neighbour. And your neighbour's everybody. And that means getting vaccinated is just the right thing to do.
But I'm saying,
and the evidence is that people are doing it. So the idea that we treat people like naughty kids when actually they're doing the right thing anyway, just as I say, it doesn't feel very liberal. It doesn't feel very necessary. 95% of people over 60 have had a vaccination. Now, if we'd been through the country and there was still 40% who were resisting, then you could perhaps understand. But that's not the case. People are getting vaccinated.
You would feel that once we vaccinated those vulnerable groups, then we should be in a position to say, look, for everyone else, do it if you can, but we're not going to coerce you or actually make that a legal requirement or shut you out of society. Is that what you mean?
I think, so first of all, I think when we get down the age groups, people will get, I see no reason why, the under 50s, under 40s, under 30s are going to be any more reluctant to get vaccinated than the over 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And so and there's no evidence as we come down the age groups since this all began in December with the vaccinations that, younger age groups are more reluctant to get vaccinated.
Would your party vote against vaccine passports just for on the basis that it's against core principles?
Well, I certainly think that we managed to make massive progress so far without coercing anyone. No one who's 90 or 80 has been told you must be vaccinated, but try holding them back. So people have turned up and have been vaccinated. So I think the need for coercion just isn't there anyway. It would feel wrong in any event.
And I know Michael Gove had a Zoom call, didn't he, with some of your colleagues. So, will you actually say, well, we don't agree with this? There are lots of reasons why we don't want to do this at this stage.
Yes, I think the idea of a vaccine passport, certainly domestically, just seems wrong and seems unnecessary. particularly when you see the number of people who have been vaccinated. Of those people who've been offered the vaccine, I mean, something like 95% have taken it up, and that is more than sufficient. And that, as we work through the age groups, I think that will keep up. I think obviously there's an argument once we've got everybody over 50 vaccinated, certainly twice, then that's all the age groups where 99.9% of fatalities have happened, and surely then shouldn't we unlock? And I think on face value the answer to that is yes. Slightly more complex is, of course, that we know the vaccine works against the strains that we've got. And the problem is a whole bunch of people who are younger could pass the disease symptom-free to one another and see new variants develop as a consequence, and that might end up breaking the wall that is the vaccine. That's the theory. What do I know? I have a grade C in biology O level. But I do think that that does sound plausible. And it's why I think the government would be wise to be erring on the side of caution when it comes to the advice, but it does not need to err on the side of intrusion when it comes to laws and restrictions on our liberties.
You might want to put some points across about what do we need to do now?
There needs to be a plan to catch up with cancer, and the cancer recovery plan was inadequate, and it has now expired, or it expires at the end of March. And so there needs to be somebody put in charge of, in the same way the vaccination programme was given its own minister and has been successful by having a single reporting structure and it being seen as a project that the government was just going to make sure it ran well. We need the same approach to cancer. We always need the same approach to cancer, but we specifically need it now to see this as a kind of 18-month, 2-year project starting kind of yesterday, with resources committed to it when it comes to diagnostics and it comes to treatment. So to put bluntly, there wasn't a single mention of cancer anywhere in the budget, nor any additional money to catch up with cancer in the budget. In the comprehensive spending review in the autumn, there was one mention of cancer. There was some money, but all it was to replace knackered, out-of-date diagnostic equipment. There was not any more. There was no net gain for diagnostics, just some replacement kit, and not a thing, not a bolt, not a penny for anything to do with treatment. And those are the things that you could do. It is science. It's not rocket science.
So on mental health?
Well, in both mental and physical health, so much of it is down to the availability of a skilled workforce. And so solving it overnight is really tough. Yeah. And so what you should be doing is investing in a new generation of people who can work with young people of all ages when it comes to mental health conditions. We've got quicker access to better treatment. But I think the other thing that's vitally important is that we use the skills and the abilities we've got now. Yeah. So here am I, up in the Lake District, and we are home to many of the country's most important outdoor education centres. Yeah. And outdoor education is a critical part of young people's learning. What it does, amongst other things, is help to get young people to discover that actually they love learning, and they can love learning. You build your confidence. It helps to build resilience so that when tough things happen, you're more likely to get through them in one piece. And so here we have outdoor education centres that have been absolutely crippled over the last 12 months. The government has only just given them an indicative reopening date in the coming weeks, months, and it's given them no specialist funding. What I think they should do is give them those things, but also look at outdoor education centres and think this is a skill set to deploy right into schools in different ways to make sure we just connect with young people. Never mind, cramming up with additional summer schools that might actually worsen young people's mental health, probably do no educational good. Invest time in the coming weeks and months in just giving kids that opportunity to rethink what it is to learn and to rediscover a love of learning from the very hands of the people who are just best at it.
And we could lose some of those, couldn't we? I think you've done some work on that, showing up to 40%, I think, may have to actually close, something like that.
We've the assessment is that there were 15,000 people who worked in the outdoor education centre, and of those 15,000, 6,000 already lost their jobs. And since that figure came out, a centre close to me with just 14 staff lost 6 of them. So it's getting worse all the time. The government has this last week done something we've been asking for months and give us an indicative date on the roadmap. So there was no roadmap date for outdoor education until the end of last week. So that is something.
Your reservations about extending the powers on Coronavirus Act, would you have thought those powers were too sweeping earlier on, or is it just about now that you think actually that this has gone too far? Or had you had reservations before? At what point? What things do you think are excessive?
Well, obviously we had reservations right from the beginning, although you understand as a pandemic explodes in front of you and you see the fear of what might be coming, and we read all that was going on in northern Italy over, 13 months ago now, why those powers were considered. But it's one of the reasons why we pushed back at the beginning and demanded that Parliament should review them regularly. You remember, originally the government were putting those powers to the House to have them indefinitely. And so Liberal Democrats are amongst those who said, no, you can't have that. So we didn't vote for the renewal in October. We voted against the renewal most recently, because I think they're unnecessary and they're an overreach, and they are powers that are greater than the government needs for longer than it needs them.
And have you got any specific examples of which ones you are particularly aggrieved about?
Well, obviously, I think all this stuff about, I'm someone who believes that, peaceful protest is really important, whatever your opinion. In a free society, it should be allowed. And I think to be, for a government to look like it's protecting itself from those people who disagree with it, it always stinks. That really is a first sign of you slipping into a rather dangerous form of authoritarianism. I make no negative comment on Keir Starmer, but I think his approach to succeeding Jeremy Corbyn is to try to be maybe a little bit too neutral on important issues, scared that Jeremy Corbyn was not so neutral on important issues. So I understand the motivation of the Labour Party, but it does sometimes rob us of an opposition.
Do you think it did become a left-right sort of issue about, how coronavirus and the act was seen? Do you think there was a party political?
No, I think it's a liberal authoritarian split, not a left-right one. You find people on the in the Conservative Party and the Labour Party who instinctively kind of think it's their job to run everyone's lives, agreeing with each other quite easily. It was the Liberals who found this really angst-ridden as a decision. We understood in the first place why it was necessary. We think that the restrictions are, the laws that the government passed that gives them the ability to interfere and control people's lives. As I say, it's an overreach and for too long.
So do you think we're moving towards a totalitarian state? Lord Sumption has expressed concern about that. And is that a worry for you?
I don't want to overstate the risk. I think it's kind of important to remember, though, that governments can tend to rather enjoy having powers they said initially that they didn't need for that long, and get used to being in control of people's lives in ways that I think under normal circumstances we would never consider to be acceptable. And so I do worry about this government's instincts when it comes to freedom and liberty, because I think that, we often hear the rhetoric of freedom coming from the lips of people who practice it the least.